Welcome to Melanin Convos, a sisterhood of mom friends having relatable and unorthodox conversations while holding space for each other and amplifying Black voices. Welcome to Melanin Convos. I'm your host, Nikita Buckner, and today is a really special episode because I'm here with my husband, Nigel, and we're going to be talking about marriage, fatherhood, Black fatherhood in particular, and just sharing a little bit more about our story, how we met, and just all the things about parenthood. So Nigel is a dad, a therapist, and an author. I'm really happy that you're here. So my first thing that I do at the beginning of the podcast is do like a mom moment, but we'll do a dad moment. So what is one thing that you wish you knew about being a dad, about parenthood that maybe you didn't know before?
Yeah, I think it would be more about the aspects of prioritizing your personhood, so you as a human being, you as a dad, how important that is, and how that evolves over time. So for me, yeah, that was one thing I would say like I really learned or had to learn or had to prioritize, be more intentional with as I navigated and journey through fatherhood.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I could definitely see how being consumed with making sure baby's okay, making sure mom's okay, that you're just all in. So you don't do the things you like or love anymore because you're just wrapped up in like what's happening in those moments, which is fair. It's seasonal, but it's definitely still important. So I get that. Yeah. Okay. So every time we tell our story, we have different versions of this story. So I'm gonna let you go first. You can tell your version of how we met. Yeah, that story. How did we meet? What happened? Who did what first? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could tell your version of the story, and then I'll fill in the blanks.
Okay. We met in 2015.
Okay.
October of 2015. We met via Twitter.
Yeah.
There was a Twitter thread. I commented, and we were going back and forth. We then carried it over into the DMs. She gave me her number. Why did she give me her number? She wasn't on Twitter that often, so like the replies were a bit delayed. So she gave me her number. We started talking, and it wasn't anything serious, so to say. We were just getting to know each other.
Yeah.
We have similar church backgrounds, come from the same like church organization. So I guess part of the funny story, like I've always seen her sister around. She always saw my mom around, but we never crossed paths. We never met. So that's like a interesting fact. And then we met 2015, started dating in 2016. We got engaged in 2017, married in 2018. Yeah.
Wow, you did good.
Well, that's the story.
Yeah, but sometimes people leave things out, they forget, they add things.
No.
But you did good. We did meet on Twitter, which was interesting, different. And I did give, I guess what is it? Shoot my shot. I did that. I gave you my number, and I think I like that it's different. Our story is different in the fact that I didn't go on Twitter looking for anybody, and I don't think you were on Twitter like looking to meet anybody. It just so happened that like we struck a conversation from a tweet. Yeah, a tweet. So I absolutely love that. Okay, so we've been married for 5 years. How do you feel the first year of marriage went? A lot happened that year, but how do you feel like the totality of that first year? How did that go for you?
It was a lot. In retrospect, or in context really, we got married in August 3rd. 5-6 weeks later, he went back to school to finish her degree in psychology.
Yeah.
2 months later, 6 weeks later, we got a call from our pastor to become children and youth pastors at our church. So that happened in November. That officially happened in November. And then, navigating being in school, becoming pastors, and just life and work intersecting with all of that. For those that may be watching from Toronto, like I lived in Brampton and worked in Vaughan, so I was
about
working
45-minute drive.
About that.
There and back.
Depending on the school, so like certain locations would have brought me to like DVP, Markham area, so like every day was just long. The days were starting at like 5:30, 6 a.m. Days were ending maybe at like 9:30, 10, so to say, depending on the day. But a lot of it was, going to work, picking up Nikita from school, battling that traffic to get back to Brampton, getting home around 5:36. And from that time till maybe like 9, Nikita was at the desk doing work, and I was cooking, laundry, packing lunches, cleaning, depending on the day. Like, all those domestic roles, so to say, is like what I did, because that's what was
needed.
That was what was needed. That was what was required. But like that was the year.
How did it feel for you?
I mean, I think it was what was needed, so like, of course there were days that were hard, like I was just tired and those kind of things. I think when it finished, so like when her semester ended and that wasn't the life for like 3 weeks to a month, that's when I was able to like breathe. And I think, and I don't know if you remember this, but during that time one of the things that we did, like when we were dating and stuff, we went to like Starbucks and like talked and had conversations. Yeah. So Nikita wanted to do that during that break, and I just wasn't in for it. Like it was a Saturday, and I was just like, I don't want to leave the house. Why are we going somewhere when we can do this at the house, kind of thing? And she got really emotional. She got really upset about it, and I think after the fact is when I communicated to you and I said, like, look at the last couple of months and just imagine like how that impacted me. Like I had to be at this level for like 4.5, 5 months so that you could do what you needed to do. And things that you may have had to do, you didn't have to do anymore for that period of time because I was doing it for the unit to function and everything. And I'm like, now it's my time to like chill and relax and not have to do any of those things. So I think like that was like a bitter pill for you to like swallow and take in. But like, that was like the year. And then I think the following semester kind of lightened up.
Yeah, because I think I had less.
Yeah, you had less classes. So you didn't have, it wasn't as heavy. So that's when I was able to like go to the gym. I wasn't going to the gym for that period of time. I was able to get back into the gym. And so I guess like, our reward, we went to Miami for anniversary. So I guess that was like our reward.
It was like a whoosh.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's how it felt when we went to Miami, that like celebrating that 1 year. But I think that year felt really like go, and we were constantly going. There wasn't really much time to like just sit back and like take in. And there's so much rhythm and routine that we were establishing and trying to like sort through being newly married. I don't know if all of our decisions that we made right after getting married were the most wise decisions, because we were trying to like establish routine, and then we added other responsibilities to our plate while we were trying to establish routine. And I think I do remember now that you mentioned it. And I think for me, wanting to do that is like, okay, we haven't really had an opportunity to connect in a way that we have been when we were dating. So let's do that. Right? So I definitely, we've already talked this through, but I definitely like get it. And I can see how that first year can be like, it's a whirlwind, so many things are happening. And I'm sure there are a lot of things that happened in that first year that probably wouldn't happen now. We've grown, we learned, like, there's things that we don't argue about anymore, right? So like 5 years later, looking back, what is some of like, I guess the silliest things that we like fought about and got mad with each other over? And now looking back at it, it's just like, that was so silly. Like, it wasn't worth the argument. Like, in the moment, it was worth the argument because you were annoyed. But looking back at it, just like, that was.
I don't know. Like, looking, like, if you were like our marriage, like, we don't typically argue, like heated arguments. So
Yes.
I think it's just more of like moments of like annoyance kind of thing. So I can't recall something that we like argued about. I think it's just more of like little nuances, little changes. I was just like, why?
Like what?
So I think for me, it's like our standards of cleanliness has been something that's like, will be like the annoyance. So like, I think I'm more organized than you are.
Okay, here we go.
But you don't agree with that.
I don't. So this is one thing that I don't even know. I mean, I think it was more annoying our first year of marriage.
Yes.
I know exactly where you're going with this. I'm not as annoyed about it anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, so like, remember I'd be like, oh, you think meat is like piling the things up and it's in a corner.
Yeah.
Meat is, it's put away. Like, it has a place, it goes to its place.
Yeah, but if I have access, I need access to it. I'm not putting it somewhere where I have to constantly get up and go find it. So for me, it's like, this is my area. It's organized to me. But I just think I'm an overall more organized person than you are.
I don't agree.
Hence,
We'll always have this argument about that. Yeah. Is there anything else that you, when looking back, you're like, that wasn't worth it? Mentioning or like bringing up to me?
Man, it's really tough because like when I think about the last 5 years, it was really a.
But the first year.
Yeah,
think about the first year.
First year was just. It was the fact that like I'm married to somebody else and we do things that are just completely different. So I remember we came back from our honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
I went to work. Came back from our honeymoon. I went to work, and at the time we were living in our parents' basement. So I came down the stairs, and everything was just in a mess. Like, suitcase was open, clothes were everywhere. I remember your weave was spread out on the floor on top of a towel. I was like, what?
I was watching it.
Like, what is this? So like for me, I think it was just like having those moments of like knowing when to like bite my tongue or like say like clean up. Like, this is annoying. You know, so I think like those little moments of just like, I would just do things differently than you. And I think that was like a lot of the annoyances. So things that you found, like, I need to do it this way versus like, I'm going to do it that way.
Okay.
I think those are like the little clashes. So like to this day, we travel and when we come back home, my suitcase is empty, clothes are washed. Like, she lives out of her suitcase for another week.
But you wash the clothes. You wash all the clothes. Like, you just wash all
I do that now.
Yeah.
Like,
not then.
Yeah, then it was like, So
yeah, it does take me a while to get the things out the suitcase.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I think like there wasn't anything that really like we argued about that I think was silly, because I don't recall us having like arguments. I think it was just little nuances of like, I would do this differently than you, and that kind of clashed. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree that there was like you said, things that we clashed on, but then me feeling like, okay, I'm just gonna like not say anything or like bite my tongue and just like leave it alone. But like, I know I'm annoyed on the inside. Mm-hmm. But I think now, 5 years later, I don't necessarily all the time not say. Like, if you do something that annoyed me, I'm gonna tell you, like, that was annoying. Or like, I didn't like that you did X, Y, and Z. Like, I'll come in and tell you. I think that is where I've grown over the years, being able to like say, like, I don't like that or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah? Makes sense? Okay. So 2020 was COVID. We're gonna take it back to 2020. March of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great time. We found out we were pregnant literally like 2 weeks after the world shut down in Canada. Our birth plan changed like so many times. And because we were like so like scared and like trying to be cautious of our newborn, we were alone a lot of the time. And like, even though we lived with my parents, they went to work and they were scared of like touching our son and stuff like that. So they didn't really take him a lot. So we were pretty much alone as new parents. When you found out that we were pregnant, considering that it was like COVID, what did you feel? Like, what were your first thoughts about my wife's pregnant, I'm gonna be a dad, it's COVID? What were your first thoughts?
First thoughts around like becoming a dad, COVID. I wasn't concerned. I think it was just the newness of it. It's like just how to navigate. And I think like that's just me as a person, that like the emotional side of experiences, like I don't entertain it that much. So when we found that out, I'm like, okay, it was just like planning kind of thing. It's like, okay, what are we gonna do financial wise? Because we were gonna go on mat leave, the world was shutting down, work was weird at that time. So it was more like, what are those aspects gonna look like? I think for me, like I knew myself, like I knew I wanted to be a dad. I knew like there wasn't anything I didn't feel like I wasn't ready for. But at the same time, it was just like the experience of it. So it being COVID, it was like, what are the next steps? What do we need to do? But at the same time, trying to figure that out, I couldn't, because like
it was constantly changing.
Yeah, everything was constantly changing. So I would say like that was probably like the frustrating part. Like everything was changing, and on top of that, I was in the process of like starting school, or at least the initial conversation.
Yeah, we're having conversation.
Going back to school to do my master's. So
yeah,
all those different pieces, balancing that, figuring that out. That was kind of like where my mind was at. So I don't think like the joy or excitement, or the case may be, was something I really experienced. It was almost like, here's something else you need to transition to, kind of. So it was like, not say I wasn't excited or anything like that, but like it was that juggling act of like, okay, be excited, we're, this is great news, all those kind of things. But now I guess it's like that responsibility aspect of being a husband, or like that kind of kicked in, and I left like excitement, joy to everybody else, whatever the case may be. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, but did that feel heavy? Or how did that feel to not be able to bask in like the joy and the excitement and having to think about the responsibility?
It wasn't heavy. Like I wasn't mad. Like I think my excitement came out more later down the journey, when I realized we were having a son, because I wanted a son. So I think like that is when like I had that moment to be excited. But I think in the moment it was just like, and it's just how my mind is wired. Like for me, I don't allow the emotional side of a new experience or something traumatic or whatever the case may be, like to kind of overtake me. It's just like, okay, be level-headed, be calm, let's navigate and figure this out. But I think even when you told me, I was just like, okay. Like I think I was a bit shocked, because as well, like our timeline, we were gonna start trying in like September of that year. It's February, March. Going into March.
It was like 2 days before my birthday when I found out.
You knew before that. You knew.
Yes, I knew.
Weeks,
yes,
you knew like 2 weeks. I think it got confirmed.
Yes,
but
you're right.
Like there was like more, I guess, detailed confirmation. But you knew maybe like from
beginning of the month.
Yeah, beginning of March kind of thing. So like that kind of shifted everything. So like now, looking back on it, it's like, okay. I started school September. 2 months later, our son was born. Right, so like I'm in the hospital doing final, like writing papers, and Nikita's, next to me in bed shaking with her contractions and all of that stuff. Life was life, but I think for me, it's just like my experience, especially from a sports perspective, like playing soccer, like I was able to really just like compartmentalize everything, just like be in the moment when I need to be in the moment, and like whatever I was like feeling or whatever the case would be, like it was there, but like it didn't consume me. It's like it's difficult, but like this is what we have to do, kind of thing. And that's kind of like been my MO kind of thing. Like it's difficult, but like this is what we gotta do. So,
yeah, I would agree. I think it was surprising to get pregnant that quickly.
Yeah.
Especially because like we got that news from like my doctor, and then we're like, okay, let's start trying.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting for us to get pregnant like that quickly.
Right.
Only this was like, oh, like wow.
Yeah.
It happened. So it was surprising, and then it was a little bit nerve-wracking because like the world just shut down, and not being able to experience all of the pregnancy things, like not being able to go to like the pregnancy classes together, like not being able to just do all those milestone things when you have a child or when you're pregnant. So I think like it was exciting, but it was like stressful and overwhelming. It was a lot.
Well, I think that's just like that's your expectation. Like I wasn't expecting any of that, to be honest.
Any of what?
Like going to pregnancy class. Like to me, those are things you see on TV. So like,
but you do them in real life.
Right. But like when I'm saying like going to a pregnancy class, like I don't know anybody that's done that. So like that wasn't like a thought for me, oh, we're going to pregnancy classes together or anything like that. And like even the milestones for you, there aren't really like milestones for dads or becoming dads really. So like there wasn't any, like that 9-month period is me waiting for this kid to show up. Like there's no like milestones for me to experience. So even during that time of COVID, especially like where we were in life, for me, in terms of like church, like I was happy that COVID happened, respectfully. In that time where like I didn't have to do certain things anymore. I got to like actually rest and chill. Like life was great during COVID.
I mean, it did have its benefits.
Right. Like I was able to get up, go to the gym. I was working from home. Like life was really great.
It was calm.
Calm, yeah.
Yeah.
Calm would be the word. Like it was really calm during that time. So like I really enjoyed that. So again, like there wasn't like milestones for me as a dad. It was just like news, wait.
Yeah.
And here comes the kid. So.
Yeah, no, I get it. And you're right. There aren't really like milestones for dads during that process. So I guess it's a little bit difficult, but I would say that a milestone would have been like you being able to see ultrasounds. You didn't see any ultrasounds, right? You didn't see any of those. You didn't get to hear the heartbeat like in person. We had to like, remember, because by that time we were at my midwife. So I had to like call you, FaceTime you for you to hear. Every other time you went to the lab, I couldn't FaceTime you. So you had never seen an ultrasound. You only got pictures, right? So like those are milestones that you didn't get to experience.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if I remember back, like that was sad for you.
Yeah, it was annoying. Yeah, when I think about it now, that was kind of annoying. This is like you jogging my memory, because like I just remember driving downtown.
Yeah, that's literally all you were. You're my chauffeur. You drove me to every appointment, and you just had to wait.
Yeah. So, but I think for me, like that was my role. Like that's what just had to happen. Like I didn't see it through the lens of like, oh, it's COVID. COVID's preventing me from doing. Even though that was like the reality, for me it was like, this is my contribution to the process, so to say. So like, yeah, it sucks I can't go in, but like, how else was she gonna get here? Like, I'm still present enough to drive her, to her appointments or do whatever needed to be done, kind of thing. Yeah.
But was that like sad, disappointing for you not to be a part of those appointments?
Yeah, I think it was like it wasn't normal to like not be there, kind of thing. So I think like that was, thinking back on it now, like yeah, sure, like that was something I wished happened, but like it's you jogging my memory to remember like in that moment for me, I don't even remember like not going into the ultrasound. So I guess that just speaks to like how abnormal that actually was, kind of thing. But yeah, it was disappointing. But at the same time, like I combated it, I'm like, but this is what I got to do. This is what I know. The circumstances are different. That's kind of what it is, right? Like in a normal world, I know I would have been in there. So it's not like you didn't want me in there,
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be, right? It was like, this is what the world's like. This is how we can keep mom and child safe. So like, dude, this is just what I gotta comply with. But I think that all of that made up for like delivery. So I think like when it was time to give birth, like that was something like I pushed on. Like there was one time she was talking about having mom in the room with her and not me, and I was like, that's not happening. And I think those were the things that I made sure, like where I could be present in the room with you, I made sure to be there.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of thing,
I would agree.
right? So it's like I could only, whatever I could do, I did. So I didn't let COVID kind of like take everything away.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You were correct. So thinking about like when you thought about, I guess when you were younger, even when we got married, about what it would be like to be a dad, is there anything that you promised yourself that you would do or not do when you became a dad? So you could pick either one. Something that you promised yourself that you would do or you wouldn't do.
I don't think I ever made a promise. I think I just had like conditioned my mind. So just like, this is what I am going to do, or this is what I need to do as an as like I need to, help around the house. I need to add, to, cooking or cleaning or just like those domestic roles or whatever.
Okay.
I made sure to like, I need to make sure I do that kind of stuff. So I don't think I ever made like a promise like, I promise like I'm gonna do this, where like for me it was just like I saw things and I made mental notes, and it was like, okay, this is what I need to do, this is what I don't need to do, and all of that. So it just grew with me. And I think you were like seeing that now, kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
My domestic, like how involved I am around the house, kind of thing. And then just like with us having a kid, and just from an educational perspective, like I don't recall like my dad ever going to like parent-teacher interviews and like those kind of things. So for me, I just made mental notes of like, I'm gonna do those things. I'm gonna make sure like I'm present in that type of way. So I think like if I had to say make a promise, I think it would be like to be present. That was like a thing that I would say I promised myself. Like I'm gonna be as present as I possibly can, kind of thing.
Yeah, making yourself known in like all the environments that your child is in. Yeah, I hear that. I think for myself, I don't like you said, I don't think I said, oh, I promise I will never, or I will do this. But I do think for me saying, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm being attentive to like my kids' emotional needs and not like just pushing those like to the side or ignoring them. That's something I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to ignore what he needs emotionally. I'm going to try to like be attentive and try to like repair when there has been conflict. I think that's probably a big thing for me, like the repair. Like, so if my son did something and got like, we're upset with him, making sure to repair that after the fact so that it's not just like a pass over and we just go about like our day, making sure to like, okay, mommy, sorry for whatever, or when you did X, Y, and Z, this is why you got in trouble for whatever. So making sure that there was that repair, I think, is definitely one thing. I'm like, yeah, I need to do that because it wasn't modeled. And I personally think it's important to like just circle back and have that reconciliation like with our kid.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay. So I know like as a Black dad, there's like stigmas about Black dads not being present. They leave their kids, they're not around. Yeah, it's like a big thing in pop culture, movies, music, it's everywhere. And there's a perception that, Black dads aren't involved with their kids. However, in 2013, the CDC found that Black dads were more likely to like bathe, change, feed their kids as opposed to their white counterparts and like Hispanic counterparts. So knowing what we know now, that 70% of Black dads are actually involved with their kids, and only 6% of white dads and 43% of Hispanic dads are involved with their kids in that way. What does this bring up for you, considering the stigma that Black dads are absent?
Yeah, I think for me it's conflicting.
Okay.
Probably the word to use. Like, if I'm to hear that stat compared to my lived experience, I almost can't relate in the context of like, I grew up with my dad in the house.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I have, throughout my life, there were like older men that spoke to me or families that I saw. Like, I played soccer, so like the dads drove their kids to be like teammates in practice. So like, I've always seen dads in children's lives.
Okay.
So like, that's something like I always saw, even at school. Like, yeah, there were kids that like, you know, dad wasn't there or whatever the case may be. Like, we saw that. Like, I saw that, of course. But like, in terms of proximity and like relationally, like everyone that I was in relationship with some sort, their dad was home, their dad was present, their dad was in their life. You know, so hearing that stat is almost like I can't relate to an extent, because like my dad was there. People older than me, dads, fathers were there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But you know, to speak to the stigma of it, I think, you know, it really does fight that stigma. I think it really just, you know, adds that fuel, that arsenal of like changing the narrative and really exposing that the stigma is actually real. You know, that there is an agenda against, you know, Black fathers and the lack of fatherhoods or fathers in respective children's lives, so to say. So like, I think that that stat for me kind of just also speaks to the hope, you know, that there is change, you know, that Black dads are actually doing the work. Black dads are actually, you know, being as present as possible. And you know, that the stigma isn't applicable to everyone, you know, like it's, you know, looking at that stigma and saying, and asking it questions like, why are they saying this? What is the agenda behind it? What are they trying to prove? What are they trying to dispel, kind of thing? So for me, it kind of like, I can't relate, but I can also see that it is a good thing. Like, dads are, you know, present. Even me now being a dad with other dads at the same age as me, like, I don't see the gap that much. I still see like those dads being present and us relying on each other, building that community aspect. Yeah, I would say like that. And I think that was probably even one thing of like the communal aspect. I think I see that more with my generation of dads. So say like there's more intentionality with community. There's more intentionality with like, you know, checking in, you know, prioritizing, you know, the personhood again, and making sure like you as a human being, even though you're a dad, even though you're a husband, is doing okay as well, and then those aspects. But I think like that stat, you know, really goes, you know, challenges that narrative. It's very counterculture, you know, so bringing that stat into play kind of really sheds light on a lot of the things that are happening in society that aren't completely true, you know. So like, of course, it speaks to like mass media and like what the media is portraying in movies and those kind of things. Those are not the norms. Those are not, you know, things that are actually happening. Yes, those are lived experiences for certain people.
Absolutely.
But it's not the norm. And I think like that's what the stat kind of communicates. Like, what is being communicated in mass media is actually false. It's not the norm, and that there are dads that are very much present. And you're seeing that a lot even on social media. A lot of those pages that, you know,
are highlighting.
Are highlighting like father and daughter relationships, father and son relationships, or just the aspect of like being present.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree. I think when I see that stat, I think about how even the idea that it's Black families that are on welfare, it's Black families that are only collecting, well, this is an American stat, so that are only collecting food stamps. Like, when I think about that, and that also, those stats, those perceptions are also not true.
Yeah.
Right? So it isn't
majority of Black families that are on like government assistance.
Right.
So when I think about that, when I see this, I'm like, oh, like this is in correlation with other stats or other perceptions of like Black families, Black dads not being present. And I think that, like you mentioned, like it definitely pushes an idea about Black families and Black men that isn't true. But it also gives me hope too. Like when I saw this, I was like, oh wow. Like I didn't realize that. Although I also always thought like, no, it is not true that all Black dads are absent or majority of Black dads are absent. To actually see like a stat about it was like, wow, like we can actually put facts into the world about what is the truth. So that definitely gives me hope. But I also think like this speaks to millennial dads. The study was done in 2013. So I'm gonna assume that it's speaking to maybe older millennial dads who were a part of the study. So I think it's beautiful to see that as the generations go, that dads are being more present. They're taking more of a partnership role in the child rearing experience. And that's beautiful to see. And yeah, we don't have to, I guess, put dads like in this box of, I see a Black dad, like they're probably not with their kid, or that if you do see a Black dad with their family, that they're like an anomaly. And it's not necessarily
not true.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I've seen this on social media quite often. I'm sure you've probably seen it too. This idea or this concept of being married single mom. So just the idea that you, like, the mom is married, but she's operating as a single parent still, even though she has a spouse in the home. The dad may be there or maybe travels a lot, whatever the circumstances are, but the fact that the mom is married and is still, I guess, feels like they are a single parent. What do you think about that? Have you seen that on social? Have you heard about that?
I actually haven't. I haven't seen that on social media. I guess that if it's like a conversations that are happening on social media, I haven't really seen that. But to speak to that, I think I would ask that mom, that wife, to really take the time to reflect and say, like, is that husband, is that father really absent or not present, or are they showing up in the house in different ways?
Okay.
So are there things that they're doing that you may not be seeing, or are there things that they are doing that is actually helping the functionality of the household, right? So there may be things that they're doing and you just don't know that they're doing, and maybe it's just about giving them credit for how they're showing up or what they're doing. So I think I would ask that question, is there ways that husband, that father is showing up in the house? But I think to say like they're not showing up is a bit extreme.
So I think when we talk about the single married mom thing, we're talking about like the mom is the one that is cooking, is cleaning, is taking care of the kids, taking them to their activities, taking them to school, like everything that has to do with the child. It's the mom that is basically the primary parent, and the other spouse isn't really involved in those decision makings and those like action items as it relates to the child.
Okay. Yeah, I think one thing to explore is like, I would ask, what was the conversations like during engagement and dating, and probably even like early years of marriage prior to kids, in terms of that? Like, was expectations communicated or spoken about?
Okay.
Was there any sort of plan made in terms of, this is what the husband is going to do, this is what the wife's going to do, and that will be revisited as the child or the children get older.
Right.
And I think even with that, in the early stages of that child's life, like the mom is gonna naturally be that primary care, right? So I think like that has to be accounted for. Like there's an aspect of like a bond that a child and mom will naturally have as they become a newborn and growing up. So like that dad is probably like trying to find that place of how to show up, kind of thing, how to be present. So I think this is where like a lot of conversations need to be had. And then on the flip side, what does, like, in those expectations, what do you need? Like, so actually communicating what you need from that dad, from that father, I think would be vital. And then I think there's also the aspect of like their childhood and how that intersects in their personhood. So what was childhood like for them in their house growing up? Did they have chores to do? Did they have responsibilities to do? Because oftentimes like that's going to grow with them. So
definitely.
Like using me as an example, you know, I had to learn how to do my laundry at a young age. I had to learn how to like cook, season chicken, like do those kind of things at an early age. So like now that I'm where I am in life, being a husband, being a father, those things come naturally. Those things is just the norm for me, kind of thing. And because I have those reps in from like being a child or in teenage years and those kind of things. So I think it's a lot of like exploration, a lot of conversations that need to be had. And I think it's also about like validating that, like, yeah, that's frustrating, you know, to be that primary parent. Like that can absolutely be frustrating. I guess my question to you would be to that mom or whatever, like, what are we gonna do? You know, what are we going to do with that frustration? Do we have the capacity to have those conversations? Do we have the capacity to, you know, create a structural plan for the house and say like, hey, this is what I need you to do. This is what on Wednesdays you're cooking dinner, or on the weekends you're cooking dinner. Because and with that, I also saw that growing up. Like I had friends growing up whose parents did that thing. So like the mom cooked throughout the week. On the weekend was dad's responsibility to handle dinner and those kind of things. So making sure or finding ways to create that balance within the unit, I think is important.
So basically you're attributing the fact that you have seen this modeled in childhood. That's why I guess it's easier for you to, I guess, help in that way, or be a partner that shows up in more domestic ways. I really hate that word, but yeah, it's easier for you to show. So I guess to your point, like about what were the conversations during dating and before kids, and I think some moms might be watching and be like, oh, well, we didn't have those conversations or whatever, and may feel like discouraged. But I think like there's always an opportunity to have the conversation. About who does what, how are we going to do this, and like navigating, creating a plan so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming and burdensome for the one parent, right? And I think, well, based on how you described your childhood, it does sound like people were equipped with taking or playing both like roles in a family unit, right? Because I was gonna ask you, like, do you think Black dads are equipped with being able to do the more domestic task in a family when they get to having a family?
I would say yes or no. Like I've heard stories of, you know, dads only learning how to cook or do something like in their 20s, or not having those responsibilities until their 20s, or when they've moved out and gone to like college, university. So like I've heard like both sides of the story. But overall, do I think dads are equipped? No, I would have to lean to no. I think when we think about, you know, from childhood up until now, women are conditioned to be moms. They're conditioned to be wives. Whereas husbands are, you know, we play with cars, we play with action figures. Like we don't have that conditioning of we have to provide or we have to do these domestic roles. So to say, we're not conditioned with that from a young age. So there are women essentially have like years on men in terms of that like development, if we were to call it that word. Like they have years on them. So like now when they're in their 20s, you know, or getting married and those kind of things, this is a norm, you know. So I think even speaks to like this whole narrative of like, you know, wives cooking and cleaning and husbands going out to work. Like that's the narrative that's always communicated. So I think that's kind of just what grows with dads. But the narrative is also changing, so to say. So now there's more requirements of dad to be more emotionally present, to be, more contributing to domestic roles in the house that wasn't before. And I think there's that learning aspect that they don't have. So I think this is where community comes in, where surrounding yourself with other dads, or whatever the relationship was with your dad, exploring that or deepening that even more. I think can be beneficial in terms of navigating or figuring out how to be more present. Because I don't think dads genuinely don't want to be more present. I think it's just the how. How do I do this? And I think this is where partnership and marriage comes in. Okay, I know I need to be more present. How can I do that? So I think there's a level of vulnerability from dads to their partner, to their wives, and saying I want to be more present, or I see that you have, a hard time on this day or whatever. What can I do? Kind of thing. So I think there has to be mutual vulnerability, because when the husband comes, the wife has to
offer.
There has to be an offering. There has to be that trust factor, that I'm trusting you to do this, and even if it's not done the way I would have wanted to do it, or the way I would have wanted to do it, it's still getting done. And I think that's what matters. Because I think if moms were honest, there's a bit of pride there. I think there's a bit of, that aspect of I'm a mom, this is what I do, or they take joy in caring for their kid or showing up for their kid in this certain way, or whatever the case may be. So I think there's an aspect of allowing dads to be dad. They're going to do things differently, but allowing them to do it, I think, would be beneficial. I think it will take that load off of moms and allow them to be present, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think to your point about girls being conditioned a certain way to do things, and you're right, girls do have a one-up on boys, men in that regard. And I do think that's even all more important why when kids are young, that we teach them that these aren't necessarily gender roles. These are life skills. You are a human, you need to eat, therefore you should learn to cook. You need to be able to feed yourself. So cooking isn't something that women do. Cooking is something that human beings do, right? And so all children learn to cook. All children learn to clean, and all the things, because these are just human things that we do throughout our lives to sustain our life, right? So I think changing that narrative is important, and especially young kids, the idea that little boys can't have a play kitchen. Why can't a little boy have a play kitchen? Right? So just different things like that, I think is important in changing the narrative. But to your point about dads not necessarily knowing how to do or what to do, because they haven't necessarily had the experience for as long as a time as mom. But I do think, you mentioned, just recognizing the frustration. This is frustrating to be primary parent, and I definitely hear you. I think there is a season in time where mom is primary parent. For that season. And is it frustrating? Absolutely. I've definitely experienced it, and it is annoying, but being able to express that to you and share with you, this is frustrating, and coming up with a plan after. But I think also acknowledging this is a season. It's not going to be like this forever. And how can we ensure that it's not like this forever? Because as they grow, they're going to be more independent. They're not going to want to be under mom all the time. But how can we push them to dad a little bit in the next season of their life? So I definitely do agree with you, and I definitely see any mom that feels they're the primary parent, they're the default parent, and it is overwhelming, and it is stressful, and it is hard. So I definitely see you, and you're not alone in that experience. My last question: what's one thing you wish dads did more of, particularly Black dads, or understood more of?
That this is a lifelong calling of sacrifice. So I think it's understanding the importance of family, and that things are going to change. Once you become a husband, once you become a father, things are going to change. Your priorities are going to change, And fighting that is just going to cause more conflict. It's going to cause more frustration.
Right. Okay.
You know, so I think, I wish dads knew that more. That when I become a dad, like, there are things that are going to change. Like, I'm not going to be able to hang out with you guys as often. Or
right.
I'm not going to be able to do the things that I want to do. So one of the things that I've said to people, or oftentimes I remind myself, like, there are things I don't want to say yes to that I'm going to have to say yes to, and there are things that I want to say yes to that I'm going to have to say no to. And that's because I'm a dad and I'm a husband. So no, I can't come out tonight. Do I want to? Absolutely. Right. But like, no, I can't come out tonight because my wife is out, or she needs me to do this, or my kid is doing whatever the case may be. Like, that aspect of, like, I need to be present at home. So understanding and accepting, like, the changes that come with being a husband and being a father, I think is important, because I think that probably contributes to the previous question of, like, that whole single momness, that dad thinks that, becoming a dad, becoming a husband is something I checked off of the list, and that's it. Not knowing, like, this is a lifelong journey of sacrifice, of work, of presence, of intentionality.
Right.
And at the same breath, it's not, dads forgetting how to prioritize themselves or how important their personhood is, but it's understanding that, like, this is your responsibility, no one else's.
Right.
It's not your friends, your uncle, dad. Like, this is your responsibility, and you have to rise to the occasion, if we were to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That was beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for coming and being on my podcast. How can people find you?
Instagram. I'm on Instagram. This is Nigel. I am also a therapist, as was said at the top of the podcast episode. I do work for an organization called Soul Care Christian Counseling and Consultation. So you can find me on there. And yeah, I don't do Facebook anymore.
And you can find you on here because you'll be on my podcast.
Yeah, you can find me on here as well. Yeah. But yeah, those are the two main places where you can find me. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching Melanin Convos.